does, how many planet Earths do you need? At per capita carbon consumption of US, how many planet Earths do you need? At per capita carbon consumption of UAE, how many planet Earths do you need? So for US, we need 5 planets. For UAE, we'll need 6 planets. Anyone here who is aware of another planet where life is possible? Musk is telling us that we are an interstellar civilization, but we haven't arrived there yet. There is only one nation in this entire world whose lifestyle, if it is scaled to the entire world, we can still be within one planet, and that is the nation that you and I belong to. That is Bharat. Now you can argue that because we are at a certain stage of development, our energy consumption is low, as we grow it can become higher, but you cannot debate against the existence of a certain culture. There is a way in this land where desire production and desire management has been beautifully articulated and lived. Now today, if you look at it, let me state an example because I come from game development. In parts, it's a sin that we've contributed to. How many of you have this experience that you pick your phone and you want to, let's say, consume some media for entertainment? You swipe, right? Is there a bottom to that swipe? There's no bottom. Now you have to understand that somebody has consciously given you a bottomless scroll. It's a design choice. It's a design choice that is based on very deep psychographic mapping because it triggers dopamine. There's a neurochemistry that informs that, right? How many of you have paid for Insta? How many of you paid for Twitter, for Facebook? Fossils like me talk about Facebook, you guys are all the other generation. So understand this. You are getting infinite data, infinite scrolling, but you are not paying. So how are the businesses running? What is the product? Who or what is the product? You are the product, your attention is what is being monetized. Right? Ultimately, this is exactly, and this is the same impact that you would have when you have drugs. That you will need to have increased level of consumption to stay at the same level of satisfaction. The mobile game design or the interface design, which are deeply studied, today provide incessant desire funnel. Because we need to understand desire itself. The value of Indian knowledge systems is in understanding how to live a good life. And to live a good life, you need to understand how desires are produced and how desires are actually dealt with. Now, René Girard, one of the most important French philosophers who's actually given a lot of philosophy to product design as well, has a theory about desire. He says that we learn our desire by mimicking. I want us to reflect on this. We learn our desire when we watch something. The way you speak, your hairstyle, the dress that you wear, all of these things that something that you would have observed. That is why culture is such a fundamental thing to even public policy. Because public policy is about public choice, then we need to understand what is producing that culture. Desires are formed by mimicking. This is called mimetic desire. For most part of human civilization, our desires were mimicked within the locus of our physical habitat. Maybe 25 kilometers, 50 kilometers, 100 kilometers, wherever you traveled, in your local language, whatever was fashionable became your desire. You mimicked it, you wanted to emulate it. But the power of exponential technology, and social scientists should study this, the power of exponential technology is that it sideloads desire. You are incessantly being loaded with desire through the power of swipe. How many times has it happened to you that you want to watch this one show, you start your Netflix or Amazon or whatever, you swipe and you realize 30 minutes have passed by and you haven't made a choice. Has it happened? It happens to me. It happens to everyone. Why does that happen? Have you studied this paradox of choice? Because we are told that an abundance of choice should lead to an abundance of contentment. But are you content or are you fatigued? So this self-management is at the heart of knowledge system. The product design comes from a worldview, and the worldview comes from a knowledge system. So the case for Indian knowledge system is to start asking more important questions. The answers you will find. It does not matter which stream of Indian knowledge system you come from, you will go to the core. You start from Nyaya, you go to the idea of Shiva. You start from Ayurveda, you'll go to the idea of Dhanvantari. You start from yoga, you go to Nirishava, but also it is still Astika. There are so many beautiful detours that you can take in the Indian knowledge system that your life becomes a very rich learning journey. You will become interesting. You will be an interesting person. You will be a rich person if you engage in this. And that's what I found personally. Because the ability to look at phenomena through a different lens is not available if you only have one knowledge system. Unless you have epistemic diversity at the global table, you will not be able to solve the problems that you created with the same knowledge system. That's what Einstein said is madness. He defined madness as the thinking that you can solve the problems by being at the same level that created the problems. So if we are talking about a sustainable development, and I want us to reflect on this from the lens of linguistics, sustainable development, right? What does it really mean? This is how language is also weaponized. This is why Matrubhasha is so critical. Because dharma, there is no difference between sustainability and development in dharma. Dharyate iti dharma, which means that which holds is dharma, therefore it is intrinsic. But if you look at this con of sustainable development purely from a linguistic sense, something was already framed as development. And then when you realized it is not development, you added the word sustainable. Why should you have two words? For those who've seen few men, Tom Cruise asked this question of Jack Nicholson, why two orders? These are contradictory. Why did you call something development if it was not sustainable? Can you really call something development? And if it is sustainable, then that is inherently development. This was done because there is a fracture in the knowledge system that produced that idea. Because they don't have Purushartha, they only have Artha and Kama. Do you understand this? Sustainability is a problem of Artha and Kama without the balance, without the thermostat of Dharma, and without the system goal of Moksha. Without something that naturally aligns with your life. You cannot have a sustainable planet with one life metaphysics. It's not about theology. It's just logic. Theology we can get later. There's no difference in the Indian context between these things. But for those who have this barrier, can you have a multicultural world where desire is being seeded into you every single minute through the power of a swipe, and you are mimicking that desire, therefore your senses are on steroids. This is a cognitive, the new colonization is a cognitive colonization. It's not just a land and resource grab. It is grabbing the way you make sense of the world or the worldview formation itself. If it was good, it's okay. We are not antagonistic just because it is coming from a different place, like Sir said. We are examining it critically because you're telling us that we don't have a sustainable planet. You're telling us that, but you're also saying that the Western model has to be exported to the entire world. 8 billion of us living the American lifestyle. Well, unless you find another 4 planets very quickly, you can't do it. Right? So there are 3 things that we need to remember. 1, desire formation happens through mimicry. Therefore, what you consume forms your desire. And once the desire is formed, we are just hijacked. We are not strong enough to actually, reflect on the desire. How many times has it happened that you walk around and you sense, you get a smell of your favorite food? Immediately the desire is formed for you to have that. And the fulfillment is only after you consume it. Right? So what is happening now is that the rate of desire production has been streamlined so much into the palm of your hands. The senses are on steroids, but the sense making is on a ventilator because there is no pause. Indian knowledge systems is that pause. It is the difference between compulsive and conscious action. There are 2 very, very important reflections that all of you should have, because we are all in this world of debate, constant opinion, desire formation. When data turns into opinion, you need to be mindful. And when opinion turns into belief, you should be careful, because your belief becomes your boundary. Indian knowledge system is the way for you to have an elevated sense making, which is questioning the way you make decisions, the way you form opinions. This is what comes to us from Mundaka Upanishad. There are 2 trees. There are 2 birds on a tree. One bird on a lower branch is observing the entire world, and it is partaking in that world. So therefore, there is no banishing of Artha and Kama. It is in the sensory world, it is in samsara, it is taking that. But in the Indian conception, there is a bird on a top branch which is witnessing this. Now understand the beauty of this, understand the power of this, which means today in mindfulness literature, this is called mindful self-aware behavior. But Upanishad is telling you this at a civilizational scale. that the samsara is there. This is what Isha Upanishad tells you. The first shloka of Isha Upanishad is telling you that you partake in the world, but take it with contentment. Take it with alacrity. Take it with awareness. That is the second bird, which is perched atop, which is observing this. And the power of observation, and practice this, you will see this. The minute you get a desire, you activate another part of your mind, which is observing this desire. Automatically, the desire, the power of observation itself automatically harmonizes the desire. And if you want a sustainable world, you cannot do it without a science of desire management. Indian knowledge system is the science of desire management. Right? If you look at this, desire fulfillment and integral living. How many of you from Karnataka here? Anybody here from Karnataka? Bangalore? Oh, okay. Right next to Bangalore, we have a temple complex in Nandi Hills. At the bottom of the hill, you have what is called the Bhoganandishwara temple. Look at how this has been constructed culturally, symbolically, and for you to have an experience of it. The Bhoganandishwara temple resembles the entire engagement with world. But on top of the hill is the Yoganandishwara temple. What is it conveying? It is conveying that life is a journey from the sensory world into something that transcends senses. As long as you're in the sensory input world, you cannot think of a larger collaboration. You have to detach. This is the idea of dharana. This is the idea of pratyahara that comes to you from Ashtanga Yoga. And this has been symbolically represented in the temple. Your life is an opportunity to go from bhoga to yoga. And when you do that on that journey, automatically sustainability becomes an outcome. Sustainability is not a concept that you practice. Sustainability is a living and therefore a function of that living. Right? So if you look at this then, what is IKS? There are many other detours. I had a whole geopolitical agenda to talk about, but maybe some other time. But IKS is a combination of oral, literary, and lived realities. Don't let anybody tell you that IKS is only scriptural or only local. The whole beauty, like Mark Tully tells us, is that the highest principle of living harmoniously with nature is not just found in some abstract place, it's found in every Indian kitchen. Your kitchen is the best representation of what sustainable living really is, because it is local, it is adaptive, it is resilient, and it is within the boundaries. So what we talk about as planetary boundaries and ecological ceilings actually start from the Indian kitchen. So there is a scriptural tradition which is extraordinarily rich, complex, diverse, all the things that we spoke about, ontology, epistemology, methodology, all of that is there. But there is also a very vibrant, rich local tradition which is oral. And most importantly, the pedagogy of transmission. Institutions, when we talk about institutions, is basically how values are transmitted. And there are three ways in which the Indian civilization managed to do this. First one is called Prabhu Samhita, which is the principle or the concept. If you go look at Yoga Sutra, Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha. In one line, Patanjali tells you everything that you need to know about life. Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha. If you understand that line, entire life is understood. But the civilization realized that not all of us are people of concept-seeking mentality. We want our friends to tell us. So your Itihasa Purana became your friend. How many of you are psychology students here? Carl Jung's archetypes, collective unconsciousness. Mahabharata and Ramayana are the Indian civilizational archetypes. Because there is the Arjunayinas, there is also the Duryodhanayinas. Sometimes on the same day. Right? So it is through this engagement, Mahabharata and Itihasa and Purana became your friend. So this is called the Mitra Samhita. There is conceptual understanding, but there is also understanding of knowledge when knowledge talks to you like a friend. But the civilization also realized that some of us are so stubborn that we don't listen to the principle, we don't listen to our friends. We listen when the object that we are wanting to learn or want to become one with talks to us like our beloved. So there is also something called Kanta Samhita. Kanta Samhita is the performative art tradition. Performative arts in India has been the greatest pedagogical innovation. Do you know what is the second largest book that is translated and consumed across the world? First is Bible because of the demography. Second is Panchatantra. And Panchatantra come from, again, for those who want to be in the creative industry, storytelling is the power of shaping opinion. Panchatantra was the world's first anthropomorphic tale of creative genius. What does it mean? It means that animals have human predicaments. It has never happened before that. what we talk about cartoon, what we talk about animation today, began with this genius in the Indian civilization where the animals started having human predicaments. Why did they do that? Because for some lesson in a creative context to enter you, you need to suspend disbelief. It has to pass through your cynicism. If it is a human character, naturally there is a barrier. Therefore, they imputed the human predicaments into the animal characters, which meant that you suspended disbelief and you engage with the story. And through that process of storytelling, you learned. So the world's first storytelling tradition, India's greatest export is actually India's storytelling traditions. India's greatest export is the theory of mind. India's greatest export is also the idea of language and linguistics, Maharshi Panini. Right? All of this is all of your inheritance. We must engage with Indian knowledge systems not because we are emotional, not because it is ours, not because it is ancient, but because it will give you a beautiful life. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for such a wonderful and eye-opening speech. The new lens that you have given to look at every aspect from the lens of Bharatiyata is really inspiring and worth practicing. Thank you so much, sir. We will now open the floor for a question and answer session based on the themes discussed today. Please ask questions if you are having. Yeah, please. Any question, any doubt?
Yes, please. And also very precise and also say that to whom you are asking the question. Huh?
Feel free, candid, no inhibition. Ask anything.
Upanishad itself means sitting near someone and asking. There's a whole Prashna Upanishad in this tradition. There's an Upanishad on questioning itself. Please.
Good morning, sir. My question is to Sir Shastraputaji. Sir, I would refer to your speech where you were talking about how we have to learn how to dig the soil in order to understand the foundation. So, I guess as a mechanism, as a framework, where does it lie to restrict the evil of traditional revivalism? Where is the boundary of it? And in order to practice it in today's policy making, what should be the parameters which we need to reconsider as young social science researchers?
Well, I think in our Indian vocabulary and the architecture of our fundamental concepts, there is something called Viveka. You must have heard about Nirakshira Viveka, which is the ability to distinguish between water and milk. Nirakshira. So if we possess that ability, we would be able to distinguish between traditions which are now obsolete, irrelevant, and perhaps worth abandoning, and traditions which we need to continue and pass on to the next generation as well. Unfortunately, what has happened, and this must have happened, and social science students would be able to understand it more deeply, that globally, in various civilizations, this has happened. There is nothing very abnormal about it. For example, in Maharashtra, I'll cite one example to you. In area, geographical region, which is known as Mawar, which is Pune district essentially, there used to be a tradition of taking a branch of a tree of a particular height and ensuring that it is planted in the midst of standing crop somewhere in the month of September. Now, and people used to worship that particular pole, maybe whatever you call it, or a stick. What is the meaning behind? People forgot the meaning. They just started worshipping maybe Arati and all those things, rituals. But what was the meaning? The purpose behind was that by the time crops come to a particular level, and there are grains also, then birds start flocking. But the birds cannot see the insects that are in the soil below, and therefore they just go away with the grains that are easily available to them. To help them position themselves at a particular level, look down at the ground, and whenever they find some creatures, maybe earthworm or whatever it is, they would be attracted towards that. So it was a mechanism to distract them from the standing crop and attract them towards the harmful kinds of insects that were there. That is why the tradition was established. But people forgot that tradition and started worshipping that stick which you are supposed to put in the midst of standing crop. तो ऐसा होता है, तो हमें सोचना चाहिए कि उसके ऊपर एक ऐसे लिखा है एक महाराष्ट्र के बहुत बड़े विचारक ने, और उस ऐसे का शीर्षक है नरोटीची उपासना. I mean, we are here to worship Shrifala, which is coconut, not naroti, which has no kind of anything within it. It is just the outer cover. So let us not get allured by the outer cover. Try to find out the inner being. That is the essence of the world. And therefore, if we have that viveka, I am sure we will be able to distinguish what is worth continuing and what is worth abandoning.
Yes. Anybody else have question? Udit.
Good morning, sir. My question is to Raghav, sir. So, sir, while critiquing the Western worldview, it is really important to critique it. But what does India's own foreign policy actually reflect in practice? It is still operating on the same global framework which is made by the West. So, do you think it should represent a proper civilizational approach rather than going on with the West?
No, that's the case for Indian knowledge systems. Viksit Bharat and Indian knowledge systems have to go together. Essentially talks about what you're suggesting. But since you spoke about foreign policy, let me briefly allude to that. Two important books by Honorable External Affairs Minister, the India Way and Why Bharat Matters. Both of them are fantastic texts of civilizational public policy making. My organization, Brihat, our main focus is to bring the civilizational elements into public policy. We refer to this. In fact, I had a whole slide on that, as well. But if you read these books, you will see how there is an Indian way of looking at geopolitics. Now, Viveka is also about understanding the context that we operate in now. And macroeconomic and macro geopolitical management in the last 10 years has been phenomenal because under very, very complex circumstances, we managed to retain our national interest. It does not need any political sort of favoritism to understand this, right? So the element that you're talking about is already in. Now, unless we have a whole generation of scholars, practitioners, and people as culture, once again taking the vitality of our knowledge systems into practice, it will just remain an idea. Why we are working in education is because education is the only place where, once again, society self-selects and gives you time. There is no other institution where people do it. So if you want to really answer this question, what is the Indian paradigm of foreign policy? How does that get also interconnected with the education system? How does that get connected with the practitioner ecosystem? So we'll have to look at mapping this entire.
Thank you, sir.
Anyone else?
Good morning, sir. I have yes, this question is for Raghav, sir. And yes, sir, when we talk about Indian knowledge system, fundamentally, what is your understanding of India and Indian? Now question number one, sir. And another question goes like this. So sir, like there is this fundamental duty in Article 51A, which talks about to promote harmony and the spirit of common brotherhood, point E, amongst all the people of India, transcending religious, linguistic, regional and sectional diversity. Regional, linguistic and sectional, sir. So while you talk about Indian knowledge system as here given in the PPT itself, it differentiates into literally and non-literally. And literally talks about Hindu knowledge systems, the Buddhist and the Jain. Why not Abrahamic knowledge systems, which came into India and which came into India and adapted culturally over the thousands of years after invasion? Why not tribal knowledge systems? Why not linguistic knowledge systems? Because like sir, we have 22 scheduled languages and thousand other unscheduled languages, which all of them who have syllables, and like every syllable of that has its own knowledge. Like we people are, existing. Our existence of life is a knowledge in itself, as you explained. So like,
Fantastic. No, समझ गया आपका
so
question का
what's
कुछ
your
और
contention about it?
Great. Firstly, the question of Indian knowledge systems. Indian knowledge systems, as we said, life practices does not distinguish between religion and does not distinguish between tribal and folk. In fact, another way of conceptualizing this, which I didn't get to, is the city knowledge systems, the village knowledge systems, and the forest knowledge systems. And this is where culture, when we talk about culture, culture is the amalgamation of all lifestyles. Now the importance is in attribution. I cannot go to US and say US is based on Indian knowledge system, even if Indians are contributing to that, right? There is a understanding of what is a core culture, where it comes from, and you cannot either appropriate or impute. That is just a mutual respectful kind of response. So what is happening in cities, what is happening in tribal, for example, Ayurveda, which I spoke about. Ayurveda did not come from a scripture, it came from forest. Shastra, the way to understand Shastra itself is like a compendium of best practices. People observed life, people looked at what is functioning, then that was codified as a Shastra, as a best practice, like how we would have it, right? So when we talk about Indian knowledge systems, the inclusivity is embedded in it. I began my presentation with the example of the tribal society in Odisha, and how they are not even talking about material knowledge system. I'm talking about how deeply embedded a sacred element is in them, something as abstract of what happens to a soul after death. Right? So therefore, there is no distinction. This is something that comes to us from a lens of looking at ourselves critically, which is important. But if it starts obstructing the ability to engage with our own knowledge, we should also be critical of that. Okay? So in this context, Indian knowledge systems is the Vedic, Buddhist, Jaina, tribal, Sikh, and folk, all of it together. It is a scriptural tradition, it is a lived tradition, it is also performative tradition. Look at the performances. The performances vary as many states as you have. All of that is inclusive. To address this, we will have to start conceptualizing what is the difference between sacred knowledge systems and material knowledge systems. Then the distinction becomes clear rather than a geographic tradition. Another thing that you mentioned about India and what is Indian, I already alluded to that, but India is this geocultural entity, which is why I took the example from literature, not from political science, which is the idea of the cultural spread of certain value system through the power of literature and poetry. Wherever those ideas are practiced in a conscious sense, that is Bharatiyata, right? And that can be anywhere. But territorially, the highest imagination that you have in the world today is nation state. If you have to go beyond this, you need a passport and a visa. That's the existential reality. So you need to, one of the things, and this is important for all social science students, Scott Fitzgerald said this, the ability to hold opposing ideas together and be able to function is the hallmark of a first-rate intelligence. So the pursuit, at least at a student level when we are practicing, before we establish beliefs, is to perfect the methods of knowing. Like Sir said, Viveka. Viveka is a practice. So before we get to the point of, because there is no belief or disbelief at this stage, there is only the method of learning. Right? So this method of learning is what we call Indian knowledge systems, and that is why there is power in that for a multidisciplinary mind, so that you can hold opposing ideas together.
Okay.
There is one.
Okay. This is the last question. Please be quick.
Thank you, sir. Sir, my question is to the Raghav sir. I like the the whole session that you have taken, it was quite insightful. However, in the introductory aspect, you talked about when you were starting you were saying that that it's not a curriculum problem. You were quoting 2 to 3 words, and then you said that it is a presentation problem. I'm a sociology student, and so we used to have a course where we talk about the Indian sociological knowledge, and we critique ourselves as a epistemological practice do we have. And whenever we were learning about these things, we were thinking that we all are on a very equal stage that we have to critical of the Western practices. However, we have yet not got the common grounds from where to start the Indian, not only about the sociological practice, however the other practices within it. Right now, you yourself said that we are ready we are up to critique the two opposing ideas. However, when I look upon my own curriculum, I'm not getting the practical way of making it happen. National education policy talks about it, but yet when it comes of practicing, we are yet. So I just want you to enlighten the practical way of making it happen in a current Indian context.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. That's such an elevated question and a most urgent one. Because I truly believe that anything that you amplify, if you don't also have the responsibility of matching the opportunity with it, it will actually lead to resentment. And right now we are having a danger where the awareness of identity, awareness of our tradition, awareness of our own knowledge systems, without sufficient grounding in the material that all of us can access, becomes an opportunity not to engage, but actually a compulsion or a burden. And that is a challenge which is why I'm doing what I'm doing, which is why Sir is doing what he's doing, which is why we need so many of us to engage in it. I'm saying that my purpose is to persuade you to be part of that solution. But that solution will come once you're convinced about the potential, not just in a content sense, not in a curriculum sense, but as a personal value. Right? That is where I was coming from. But we are fully aware that there is a huge gap between what is the corpus of our knowledge and the ability to actually integrate. There is a historical challenge to this that if you have 5 minutes, I'll go into that because it's important since you raised this. Now, at what point, how many of you are political science students here? Sociology, history, economics, all of social sciences. Okay, for all the history students, does life provide you a history problem? For all the political science students, is life only giving you a political science problem? Life comes to you as a whole, right? And this is a very Indian thing to understand. I was just talking to a scholar a few days ago, and he said, what I remember growing up in his village is that he's a very, very erudite scholar. When I walk the fields, in the village you walk the field every day, the person in the field didn't come to me and ask me a question of my subject. He said, how should I behave for my life? So the knowledgeable person was expected to bring all of the knowledge into behavior. That is one important dimension to remember. In the Indian tradition, knowledge was always like that. In fact, if you look at the 11th century text Leelavati, which I had in the presentation, I didn't get a chance to get into it, it's a mathematics text. Some of the most sophisticated mathematics is there in Leelavati, but it is written as poetry. Today, the university structure, if you have to teach it, does it become natural science mathematics or does it become humanities and social sciences? This integrality of knowledge was the core characteristic of Indian knowledge system. But it also is true that in the last 400-500 years, because of our lack of access and lack of innovation in that knowledge, the disciplines that have established, and the disciplines also emerge from a certain historical context. For over 600 years, from 1000 AD to 1600 AD, Europe was in dark ages, fighting the wars. When Enlightenment happened, what they call as their Enlightenment and Reformation, they exchanged gods. They exchanged the religious god for the scientific god, or faith for reason. This binary of faith and reason, the binary of God and scientist, is a very historically driven context in the West. And the university structure emerges out of that historical context, which is when sciences became a department. And because physics was super successful for the next 200 years, because of Einstein, Bohr, all of that, Planck, all other areas of human study had to mimic being scientific. That is why social studies became social science, political studies became political science. Science became the barometer through which everything is studied. Whereas art, tradition, living ways actually got relegated. Social science was actually a revolution to that. When Comte and Durkheim, when they looked at it, they started talking about this from that perspective. that we are not just imitators. We are talking about the utility of this knowledge into society, which is actually a very Indian thing. But the disciplines emerged also. The problem with the West, the big fracture that they have psychologically, is that the birth of enlightenment is also the birth of modern colonization. It's a problem that they have, that their greatest period, for any conscientious young person in the West today, and I empathize with them, their greatest period, they don't have anything to hark back and say we were great at that time. Because they've been told that around the same time, historically, and that's true, is also when you went and conquered. So this fracture is a very deep fracture. That is why people went into postmodernism, post-structuralism, and all of the problems, right? Which then meant that the disciplines like anthropology, sociology, emerged out of the colonial construct which was used to study other cultures. For us, there is something to study you, we will use anthropology, right? That became a problem. When you talk about Indian knowledge systems, that binary won't exist. Now, this is the theoretical foundation of why we need our own social sciences, but that has to translate into textbooks, into curriculum, into pedagogy. That's what we're working on.
I'll just try to, just taking 2 minutes. Brilliant question and very practical dimension it does have. I would say, see, for example, many of you are social science students, so there is always a moot question as to how do I relate with the society? How do I relate with the nation? How do I relate with the community? And Indian scriptures tell us that the relationship definition, there are certain countries or cultures where individualism is at its peak. And there are other countries where it is socialism. Individual is nothing. India provides a balance. When we say the relationship between an individual and the society is that of a organ of a body and the entire body. Avayava avayavi sambandha. That is how it is described. So, we relate with every other individual in the society, no matter what religion, what caste, what language, or what region. He is a part of my body. Like, if there is some pain in the foot, we try to, we feel the pain in the entire body. We don't say it is the problem of the leg or the foot for that matter. So that is the definition. And there also comes the question of managing our identities. Most of the conflicts today, as a student of social science, I consider, whether it is in Europe or in the Middle East, is about one-upmanship. Because they believe that one size fits all. We never believe that. We always believe, let 1,000 flowers bloom. That has been the cornerstone of our worldview, if I describe it that way. And therefore, although it was Pujya Vinoba Bhave who said Jai Jagat, and we have been talking about Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. The G20 motto was one world, one earth, one family. One earth, one family, one future. Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. But on day one, you cannot say Jai Jagat. You get an identity with your family first, then the community, then the way of worship, then the city, then the language, then the region, and finally Jai Jagat. Shakespeare said what is in name, but there is everything in name. If my name is misspelled as Vijay instead of Vinay, I won't get my Aadhaar card. So let us also understand these limitations, and there are definite practical dimensions to what Raghavji has told to us. It is not just theoretical, it is extremely practical, and let us try to gather those insights for the betterment of our day-to-day life. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. To conclude this morning session, I would like to invite Ms. Jessica Ghatode to propose the vote of thanks.
Respected dignitaries, Honorable Chief Guest, esteemed guest speaker, faculty members, and dear students. It is my privilege to propose the vote of thanks for this enriching inaugural session of the Vikasit Bharat at 2047 lecture series. At the outset, I extend our sincere gratitude to our chief guest, Shri Vinay Sahasrabuddhe, for his insightful and inspiring inaugural address. Your thoughts have truly set the tone for upcoming deliberations and have given us much to reflect upon. I also express my heartfelt thanks to our Chief Chief Guest Speaker, Mr. Raghava Krishnaji, for his engaging and enlightening lecture. Your insights have greatly enriched the session, sir. I would like to extend my sincere appreciation to our campus director, sir, Professor Bal Rakshase, for his warm welcome address and for his constant encouragement and support in organizing this event. A special thanks to Dr. Neelam Yadav, convener of this lecture series, for this initiative and setting the context so effectively. A heartfelt thanks to all the organizers, faculty members, and students whose dedicated efforts and active presence made this session truly meaningful. Thank you, all of you. I request all of you to please rise for the national anthem.
पंजाब सिंध गुजरात मराठा द्राविड उत्कल बंगा विंध्य हिमाचल यमुना गंगा उच्चल जलधि तरंगा